Undroppables Playbook, a football podcast. With your hosts, Ashley and Mike, please sit back and enjoy the show.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Undroppables Playbook, a football podcast presented by the Undroppables and sponsored by Analyst Depot. I'm your host, Ashley. This is my lovely co-host, Michael Duncan. How are you?
I am doing not half bad today. How are you?
I'm good. In a different location with no lighting, which is making me a little upset, but we're good. We're getting ready to talk. We got our AFC and NFC matchups, championship matchups set. How do you feel about that?
Overall, a little disappointed in some of the outcomes, but I think we're gonna have two really good games of football, so it's kind of hard to complain about that, to be honest.
I agree. Why don't we start with some news first? We had a lengthy conversation last week about how news doesn't break on the show, and then 1 hour before the show, we get the big breaking news that was expected for the last several years in different locations, different occasions. But Jim Harbaugh is making his trip back to the NFL. He will be the new head coach of the Los Angeles Chargers.
Yeah, it's officially official. I mean, as official as it can be without, the introductory press conference, as we've seen from Josh McDaniels and the Colts in the past. But I don't think anyone's expecting that. Everyone's expecting him to now be the head coach of the Los Angeles Chargers. And I am very excited to see how people feel about that overall. I think he's been a very hot candidate for a number of years now, but I think his time in the NFL was probably a little more controversial than maybe some are making it out to be. The last time around, obviously, he was paired heavily with Colin Kaepernick and, his career as a whole in San Francisco. But regardless, it's very exciting as a football fan, and I'm excited to see, what the kind of next step holds for that organization.
I agree. He leaves the opportunity to be the highest paid college coach ever for this opportunity. Obviously, amidst a season of scandal in Michigan with violations from the NCAA rules. But the brothers are both back in the NFL. The brothers who may have a chance at both being champions at both the college level and NFL level in the same year. Either way, I am with you on curiosity to see how well this lands. I don't know how it has landed yet, considering it's only been an hour, but I'm curious to see how well it goes over with Chargers fans. In other news, Vic Fangio is out, I guess a mutual parting as the Miami defensive coordinator. I do want to read a statement from Miami. I think it sheds a little bit of light on there. It came from Coach Mike McDaniel, who says, "I want to thank Vic for his contributions in 2023. When we assessed this season, it became apparent that this was the best path forward for all parties involved. Now we turn our focus to 2024 and beyond with urgency as we identify the best candidate to lead our defense moving forward. We remain steadfastly committed to the development of our players and to building a winning team with sustained success." This seemed like a shock to many, even a lot of NFL insiders. I think the Miami defense underperformed later in the season, but I don't think many saw this move coming.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not overly shocked, in large part because of the news that was immediately following it from Adam Schefter, which is basically saying that he's expected to land in Philadelphia. That's for numerous reasons. The one being that he's gonna, he's from the Philadelphia area. He wants to be close to the family, which is in the Philadelphia area. And there was a lot of interest in him coming to Philadelphia last offseason as a defensive coordinator. Obviously, that didn't work out because Jonathan Gannon is a liar who lies and just kind of screwed the Eagles organization. And the Cardinals had to give up a third-round draft pick for that. But here we are. The Eagles find themselves needing a defensive coordinator, and I kind of think this is already done. I think that Vic Fangio probably asked for his release from the Dolphins when it was announced that the Eagles would not be retaining Matt Patricia and or Sean Desai, basically, saying, hey, I want to go there. I want to be closer to home. This is what I wanted to do last offseason, but here we are a year later.
Yep. So it'll be interesting to see. Obviously, a lot of good candidates still left out there. But Joe Barry, another defensive coordinator who is out, he's out in Green Bay. This one seemed fairly expected. Green Bay rode middle of the pack in defense all year, or even a little bit lower than middle of the pack all year. I saw this. I mean, not just me, most saw this coming for a couple weeks now. I think the playoff run put a little bit of blinders on for the past couple of weeks, like forgetting that he was kind of going to be out. But once their playoff run ends, he is officially out as defensive coordinator of the Packers.
Yeah, 100%. No shocker there. But good for the Packers. They're in a good position.
Yep.
They've got a very young team. So.
Yep. We have 2 hirings for head coaches. That would be, or 3 now with Harbaugh. Sorry. Titans hire Brian Callahan as head coach. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I feel like normally when you hire an offensive coordinator, and for those who don't know, he was the offensive coordinator for the Bengals for the past few seasons, under their head coach, Coach Taylor. And I mean, I guess you can point to the success of their backup quarterback after Joe Burrow went out and say, he worked wonders with him and all that kind of stuff. It's just typically, I feel like when you see an offensive coordinator get pulled from another team, it's due to, that team having just a blow up offensive year. Think Shane Steichen and the Eagles last year. Those are typically the type of coordinator hires that you see happening.
The same way Slowick is getting a lot of interest this year from the Texans.
Because you greatly outperform expectations, or you lead the league in everything. And I think Brian Callahan is absolutely deserving because he did do a lot. He did do very well with Jake Browning as their quarterback this season. So it's a very interesting hire. I can't say I know a ton about him. But I think it's going to be really important to look at how they build out the staff around him. I don't think they do this if they don't think that he is going to mesh well with Will Levis. So, yeah, it's just going to be really interesting. You and I have talked about 1,000 times. I'm just intrigued to see how they approach their offseason as a whole, the Titans organization, that is. That's
where I was going. I think it's interesting hiring an offensive-minded coach as your head coach when you still have a lot to build up on this offense, especially with the talk of Derrick Henry no longer being there, like that being a very real possibility. So, yeah. Yep. Anyway, next. Raiders hire Antonio Pierce as head coach. Nothing but praise for this one from everyone, especially from within the Raiders organization itself. The players have went on a lengthy campaign for Antonio to be the new head coach of the Raiders. In every facet, social media, regular media, everywhere you can imagine, the players have been hyping him up and basically saying like he is the embodiment of what it means to be a Raider, and I don't want to be here if he's not hired. So they go ahead, they hire him as the head coach, and it's interesting to see this new wave of former players getting head coach opportunities in the past couple of years, but we see a lot of that happening now. I think this is going to be interesting to see how well he transitions from interim head coach. You and I have talked a lot on how it changes, even though you're being a head coach, going a whole NFL season, 18 weeks of an NFL season and the ups and downs of that rather than, and being an interim head coach doesn't come with a lot of pressure. The pressure is just finish this season as best as we can, not we have a goal, a dream of a Super Bowl, and you have the whole off season and season to get us there. So I think that is going to be interesting to see how well that develops for him. Along with that, the Raiders did hire Tom Telesco, who was the former Chargers general manager, as their new general manager.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. You don't really see GMs just kind of get a second shot like that very often. And, I think there was a lot of things that have kind of gone awry in Los Angeles for the Chargers of recent years.
Yep.
Tom Telesco is certainly to blame for some of that. A GM has to be. I don't think it was, entirely his fault. So I'm intrigued to see him get kind of a second lease on life, a second chance. You just don't see it very often with GMs in the same way that you do coaches. But yeah, I just it's going to be really interesting because not only do we not see interim head coaches, I think, take over very often. Although, fun fact, I'm pretty sure Dan Campbell was an interim head coach for the Dolphins like 15 years ago or something. Maybe it's probably shorter than that. It feels like forever ago, but I'm like pretty sure that's a thing that happened once upon a time. But you don't often see the head coach, the interim head coach, get hired as the head coach. It just doesn't happen. He was. What year was it?
2015. He was the Miami Dolphins interim head coach following organizational changes when he took over a 1-3 team that had lost 3 consecutive contests and immediately helped the team win its first 2 games under his leadership.
Yeah. So
that was early in the season.
Yeah, that's really early.
Really early.
I feel like that's what's going to happen to like Dallas next year. Mike McCarthy's going after 4 games. But yeah, it's just it's going to be interesting because I feel like even sometimes when you do have that interim guy that takes over, like the one that comes to the top of my mind is Jason Garrett taking over for Wade Phillips back in God knows when that was, like 08 or 09 or whenever. Maybe earlier than that, I don't know. But he was kind of already sort of pegged as that guy a little bit. Like Antonio Pierce, I don't think if you had asked when they fired Josh McDaniels, like, oh, do you see any head coaches on this staff, like right here, right now, if you had to name one, I don't think they would have been naming Antonio Pierce necessarily.
No.
So you can look at that at 2 ways. There's kind of pessimistic and an optimistic way to look at it. Pessimistic being, well, you know, he had a great run because he's a player's coach and the guys love him and that's awesome. How does that change when it's a full season? Or the optimistic is he did a lot with not a ton of talent and, you know, maybe that's signs of things to come. I'm not one to say which one it is. It's just going to be very interesting to watch turn out, watch them figure it out. I think Mark Davis really regrets what he did a year or 2 years ago, whenever that was, when they didn't hire the other interim head coach that everybody liked, who finished the season very strong after Gruden. And I think he's trying to fix that mistake. So we'll just see how it goes.
Agreed. I think I'm interested to see what they do with the quarterback position. I mean, there's a lot to watch out for those this season, but they obviously had Jimmy G. Jimmy G got hurt, and then Aiden O'Connell ran out the rest of the season. Tom Telesco was obviously there when the Chargers got Justin Herbert. So I think it's just that's a huge point of emphasis for me, and seeing what they do with the talent that they do have there, especially with everything that happened with Josh Jacobs in last offseason and contract negotiations and stuff. So from like a roster management type of idea, I'm curious to see how well Tom and Telesco and Pierce work together to build this roster up.
Yeah, I'm wondering if Jimmy G's even going to be under contract. I mean, they take $15 million in dead money if they cut him as a post June 1 with $12 million cap savings. If it's a pre June 1, they get basically no savings, and it's $28 million in dead money. So very interesting to see what happens there. But I agree. Quarterback is going to be the big question, as it is for like 70% of franchises.
Yep. And it seems Nick Sirianni is remaining the head coach of Philadelphia after hearing MP Duncan's long rant last week about how it was possible, but also in the middle of our show saying it may be possible he leaves. He is staying.
Yeah. After the meeting that seemed to never happen, and then like you don't truly get it unless you're following the Philadelphia sports scene as closely as I am and other fans are. But like we were just waiting for this Nick Sirianni Jeffrey Lurie meeting to happen, because that is what's going to tell us whether or not he's staying on. It's not the meeting with Howie Roseman where they're trying to figure out who might be coordinators. It's really like, what's going to happen in that meeting with Jeffrey Lurie. Is he going to like what he hears or not like what he hears and get rid of him? And nothing was ever announced, which it means, after they scheduled a press conference for the end of the season with Nick and Howie, that told us all we needed to know. He is going to be the head coach. They did, as was previously mentioned, they did release Sean Desai. Matt Patricia was a free agent, and he's gone. I'm saying that as if they're players, they're coaches. And they have relieved Brian Johnson of his duties. They have fired him, even though he did get a couple head coaching interviews. But yeah, they're currently interviewing offensive coordinator candidates, including Cliff Kingsbury, along with some other prominent names from both the NFL and the college scene. So, wahoo, I guess.
Yay.
Yep.
Was the next piece of news for me to read or for you to read?
I can read it.
Okay.
Jason Kelsey's a beautiful man. This isn't. I don't really. I guess we can kind of talk about this when we get to this part in the thing. I just want to say that Jason Kelsey is a beautiful, beautiful man.
Breaking news.
And if he does retire, then I will miss him very much. Also, last piece of news I had is Joel Embiid is the 9th player in NBA history to score 70 points in an NBA game. So, yeah.
If we're going to talk about NBA news, I want to talk about Tristan Thompson taking PEDs and having no performance enhancement.
He's
with
probably
taking them.
just doing it to have more children with not one of the Kardashians, if we're being real.
Yeah.
So-
Anyway, on to NFL news. The divisional round wrapped up, obviously, on Sunday. The first game we saw was Ravens-Texans that ended 34-10 in favor of the Ravens, who will now be hosting the AFC Championship for the first time in their history. Lamar is the first quarterback to have 100 rushing yard games in his playoff career. It seems like the Texans could not really keep up. For me, I think the big difference came from that the Texans interior was having such a rough time all game with run defense and stopping Lamar Jackson. They couldn't even get hands on him. They could barely get pressure on him. And yeah, I mean, that to me, that's where the game kind of fell apart was through the run game with Lamar's legs.
Yeah, I mean, the Texans were able to kind of keep it close going into the half. I think it might have even been tied 10-10 going into the half. I don't remember the exact score. But then, eventually talent won out and the Ravens just, they made it not much of a game.
Yep.
CJ Stroud looked not quite like a rookie, but definitely like someone who just didn't have the talent to keep up with one of the deepest rosters in the league, especially on defense, in which CJ Stroud was facing. So, not necessarily the close game or the barn burner that I wanted, but it was a great showing for Lamar Jackson, and he was definitely able to, put some of the playoff whispers of, whatever to rest. So.
Yep. And I think for me, I had texted you at one point during the game. All season, I really enjoyed watching Stroud take his time in the pocket, and the Texans did give him like a decent amount, like the perfect amount of time in the pocket. This game felt like he was taking a little bit too long in the pocket. Like there were points where I was like, dude, like you got to do something. You have to do something. So I do feel like part of that is it's such a huge stage, and this kid's a rookie with not that much talent around him. And I'm not saying it's just him. It was the team as a whole. I don't know if routes weren't developing well because I felt that way at certain points. I just think this Ravens defense is just so good that things were not developing the way they expected. And it was hard for this Texans offense to adapt. I think this game would have been a little bit different with someone like Tank Dell in the game, but nonetheless, the Ravens walk away with it handedly and deservingly with this performance in this game.
Yeah. They deserve to be the 1 seed. They deserve to host the AFC Championship. Shocker.
Agree.
So.
And that offense, man, Todd Monken really changed that offense. We've been thinking it all season, and it's just like watching it in this game was something that I was like wow, like this. Full credits to this Ravens staff and to Todd Monken and for the Ravens organization for hiring Todd Monken, because this Ravens team is so different than it was a year ago in like down to just like the offensive philosophy of this team. You could see it on the field, and that has been such a key to the success this year, to unlocking this side of Lamar Jackson that we feel like we haven't seen in a little while. And it really feels like Todd Monken has opened Pandora's box of Lamar Jackson.
Yeah.
All right, on to our next one, which would be 49ers and Packers, which ends in a close one. It is the Niners walk away 24-21. Do you want to start out on this one?
Yeah, the Niners have beaten the Packers in 5 straight playoff meetings, which is, I believe, tied for like an all-time record of some sort. But yeah, it was a really close game. It was a very good game. I don't think it was the blowout that some people expected. And Brock Purdy looked human for 99% of the game. He had a great drive to win it at the end. Yeah, I don't know. I'm already sick of all the Brock Purdy talk, and I partake in it. I'm not a big fan of Brock Purdy and what he is as a quarterback necessarily. But like at the end of the day, people are just going to use this game however they feel can benefit their argument. If you're negative on Brock Purdy, you're going to say, okay, well, he sucked basically all game and he had one very good drive. Yes, it was the most important drive of the game, and that's important. And if you're big on Brock Purdy, that's the thing that you're going to focus on. You're going to say he did it when it matters. What more do you want him to do? And it's like, well, not suck the rest of the game. And he didn't suck, but he wasn't, the 49ers should blow out the Packers.
Yes.
They shouldn't blow out every team, but they should blow out the Packers. The Packers are not a deep roster. They're not a necessarily good roster. And they're very, very young. Matt LaFleur is an awesome coach. Jordan Love looked human, but he's still a good quarterback. But the Niners should have blown this team out. If they were, the number one overall front runner that kind of some people have toyed with them being this season. They won. At the end of the day, that's all that matters in the playoffs. But they did not make it the cakewalk that I believe some people were hoping they were that it would be. The Packers,
it was a 3-point game that might have just come down to a missed field goal, right? Yes, Brock Purdy. There was a missed field goal by Andrews Carlson. Brock Purdy takes the Niners down for a game-winning touchdown. The Packers get the ball back. Now, that's where they lose it. Jordan Love throws an interception. If this was a non-missed field goal and Brock Purdy takes him down for a game-tying drive, then the Packers play it safe. They run the ball out and we get to overtime. So we were a missed field goal away from this Packers team possibly losing to the Niners team possibly losing to the Packers. So you can be in the middle of this Brock Purdy discussion, and that's where I lie, even though it seems so left or right here. You can be in the middle of this discussion, and that's where I sit on Brock Purdy. I think he to me seems more of a game manager, and I'm not saying he's not talented. He's incredibly to do that drive takes talent, but I don't think he's the next coming of Tom Brady. And that's
him being an MVP this season is ridiculous. That conversation was stupid. It was ridiculous. He's not even the most valuable player on his team. He's not the most valuable player in the NFL. That is what really annoyed me about that discourse, the Brock Purdy discourse, is he can be a good quarterback who's better than the final pick in the NFL draft, but that doesn't mean that you have to vault him into the stratosphere of Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, because guess what? He's not. He's on the most talented roster in the entire NFL, and he's doing what he should be doing with that roster. So.
Agreed. So just some notes. Shanahan is now 6-4 in the playoffs. Obviously, Debo got hurt in this game and is questionable for the NFC Championship. He got pretty banged up very early on and then came back in the game and then got banged up again and then ended up leaving. It's classified as shoulder, but I think there's he's going in for a bunch of tests is how they were describing it. The beginning of this week, he was getting a bunch of tests done. I'm assuming part of that has to do with concussion protocol and MRIs and shoulder and the rest of his body, as he took a pretty bad beating in this game. This Packers, there were so many chances for this game to be even closer than a 3-point game, right? The Packers opening drive that took half of the first quarter and only ended in 3, that could have made the difference. There were so many moments in this game that you can look back on and say, this was the moment. That first drive to me is such a key moment. I was really, really surprised with the Niners' run defense. It was not effective. And that was wild to me because I was expecting that to be so much more effective. That was where I was expecting them to get absolutely shut down. And that's why I was worried about this Packers offense more, mostly. But that was the part that worked, which was interesting. And I love that you said Jordan Love seemed human. That was my first note. Throughout the games, I take notes on my phone and then I put them into cohesive thoughts afterwards, but there is just a note in my phone that says he looks human. For the first time, he looked human, and it was interesting to see. And I think he still is good. He looked human, but still did the best he could. He had 2 interceptions in this game. The last one was terrible. I can't really excuse much about that one, but he looked human and still performed pretty well. And you could be in the middle of the Jordan Love discussion too. It doesn't matter, but that's kind of where he was. He looked really human in this game. And my favorite is that we're bringing the quote back up from Matt LaFleur on Anders Carlson, in which he said, every time he goes out there, I just pray. So one missed field goal from Anders Carlson away from making this a tie game that goes into overtime. That will be something the Packers look back on.
And one more thing, just because I am the game management guy when it comes to head coaches, or it's seemingly I've complained a lot about it this year. So I do want to point out how bad Kyle Shanahan is at that very consistently. As I've said many times, he's a great offensive schemer and a good offensive play caller. He is a very bad game managing head coach. To sum it up, at the end of the first half, the 49ers had the ball at the Packers' 46-yard line with 1:19 remaining in the half and all 3 timeouts. With that good of an offense, you're up 7-6. You have to walk away with points. You have plenty of time to get a touchdown. They ran 5 plays, gained 8 yards, missed a field goal, and still went into the half with 1 timeout. Once he literally let the clock run down all the way to 40. He coaches like he's afraid. He's a coward, and that will bite them in the ass when they're playing a good, aggressive team. Like, guess who they're playing this week? The Detroit Lions. Dan Campbell, one of the most aggressive, maybe even to his fault sometimes, head coaches in the league. That is a game-changing difference in head coaches. So I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but I talk about it a lot, and I wanted to make sure that didn't go unnoticed.
Well, you want to talk about game management. How about leaving a timeout that could have potentially changed the outcome of the game? Let's talk about the Bucs and the Lions. That game ends 31-23 in the Lions' favor. The Lions on a historic run for their team, now going on the road to face the Niners. The Lions absolutely decimated the middle of the field for on offense. They decimated Baker. They had 3 completely unblocked sacks on him, like completely unblocked. And a whole snafu with the timeouts, and the Bucs had one that could have given him a chance there.
Yeah, it's not a snafu. I'm all for if you want to get on him. Like I'm you're in the playoffs. It's not a regular season game. Like play to the end of the game, whatever. But like he explained it, and just to sum up, this is basically what he said. They were in field goal. That him being Todd Bowles. They were in field goal range. We'd have had 12 seconds after using that timeout to come back from it. Then we'd have been down 11 points. So it's kind of pointless. You kind of know when the game is over. The game was over. It's hard to disagree with that. Like. Some people thought they were in punting range. I think it was probably close. Would I have taken the timeout? Absolutely. But like, I don't think this was like he misread how many timeouts he had. And like, I do legitimately think he just made a choice and said, we lost the game. Which I can respect that more than like the Kyle Shanahan style of just like, you're bad at this part of your job type of thing. So,
I agree with you. I do think, though, it is the playoffs. You're a team that like maybe shouldn't have been here. Like nobody really expected you to be here. Like, why not just try? Even if they do attempt the field goal, and I don't know. I
get that. I don't disagree with that notion.
Like, I can't get behind that. Feels cowardly to me too. Not in the same sense, but like. I understand you feel like the game is over, but then at least you like tried to use the timeout. This seems to me like apathetic to losing, which I'm not saying he is, but to me, that's how like it feels, or how I would feel if I did that, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, I don't disagree. I'm not going to get mad at anyone for feeling either way about it. I also think that I respect him to a certain degree of like, I don't need to keep getting stabbed over and over and over. I'm just gonna, slit my own throat and bleed out and be done with this, rather than just taking punishment over and like I get it.
I do.
It's not wrong. Like you can't just do whatever the heck you want. And
I was wrong when I had talked about like game preview last week. A huge part for me was that I did not think Jahmyr Gibbs was going to catch as many passes, and boy oh boy did he. He
did. He was really good.
That part of the Bucs defense was the best part of their defense all season on stopping pass catching backs. and the Lions didn't care, and the stats didn't matter. So I was wrong on that. But yeah, this we'll talk about it, the Lions, more in the preview. But any last thoughts on the Bucks?
No, I mean, it's going to be fun to see what happens with their offseason. Baker Mayfield's a free agent. Mike Evans is a free agent. Yeah, I don't know what's going to happen. So I'm intrigued. They're a fun team that went a lot farther than a lot of people thought they would. So good for them.
All right, on to the final one from the divisional round. The matchups that keep on giving. The Chiefs and the Bills meet up in Buffalo. And
it's not the only meetup that happened, though.
It is not. I'm talking about that in a second. They meet up in Orchard Park, and the Chiefs walk away with a 3-point win on a wide right. The score is 27-24 Chiefs.
Yeah. I was trying to get in the fun stuff before you got to the depressing stuff, but I guess we can start with the depressing.
Let's start with the sad, and then we'll get to the fun.
Yeah, I mean, to be like, so I'm just going to put this out there. First of all, Tyler Bass is a human, whatever. It's not like it was zeros hitting the clock. Mahomes was going to be left with, how much time left, how many timeouts. And we just needing points to win the game. Obviously, you want to put them in a position where they have to do that to take it to win the game. You don't just want to hand it to them, which is what the missed field goal did. But yeah, it sucks. It really sucks. I've said this, plenty of times on this podcast. I'm a closeted Bills fan. All of my closest family friends growing up, for whatever reason, the families we were close with, they are all Bills fans in the Philadelphia area, all transplants. I watched every Super Bowl growing up in a Bills household. I watched the Eagles win a Super Bowl in a Bills household. I really thought this was their year. I really, really did. I really, truly, in my heart, thought it was. This loss stung more than the Eagles loss for me. I can't imagine how actual Bills fans feel. Like I feel it partly because I know people I love are hurting in a way that just I can't imagine, because a lot, like I said, the parents of these families are Bills fans. They saw Scotty Norwood do this in one of the Super Bowls. I texted my one friend. I was just like, all I said was, "Oh my God." I didn't know what to say, and all he said was, "Yeah." And it's just, Josh Allen's going to get a lot of hate. I don't think he should. It happens sometimes. It does happen sometimes. I think Kurt Warner had a really, really interesting tweet, actually, that I want to pull up real quick. And that's really all that I'm probably the Chargers. The Chargers just changed their profile pic on Twitter to a very close-up picture of Jim Harbaugh wearing a headset on the sideline of a Michigan game. So that's very funny. But I want to read what Kurt Warner wrote about Josh Allen. So this is in context about the Josh Allen debate. Here's a little context. I played in 3 Super Bowls. In each of them, after the last significant drive we had on offense, I left the field with a lead or a tie. I have a Super Bowl record of 1-2. Imagine me not having to throw another pass in any of those games and being undefeated, 2-0-1. Obviously would have played to overtime and could have gone to 3-0. How would his career be viewed differently without doing anything different? He continues on to say, context matters, although very seldom really considered, but can't always be just as easy as he wasn't good enough to win. Josh Allen has been great in the playoffs, many times not needing to do anything else to win or tie in those games. Yet many want to say that he hasn't been good enough. Maybe not, but context matters. And yeah, I think that's a really good point. And he goes on in a reply to say he's not throwing defense under the bus. He's just saying it's more about there being great players on either side of the football, on either team. And that's the reality of it. That's why people are always talking about, if you flip 1-score games, like this is even more than that. Multiple times Josh Allen has left the field with, to winning the game or tying the game. And it has to be in other people's hands. And you can always make more plays. You can always do more things, whatever. But context matters, and that's how I feel about Josh Allen. He's a fan. He's one of the best quarterbacks in the league. He played incredibly well against one of the best defenses in the league this season, like we'll talk about in a little bit. But Patrick Mahomes is really good at football. Andy Reid is very good at scheming up football, and
yeah. It was tough, and it's not just the missed field goal, but I will give props to Bills fans who have raised so much money for the charity that Tyler Bass supports, to like uplift him and say like, this wasn't just you, bud. Like, and it like and like you said, it's not like that field goal would have won the game. We don't know that. We've seen that before in 2021, right? Like it was, that's the game winning 3 times in that game. So you leave too much time for Josh and too much time for Holmes and too much time for, and back and forth and vice versa. So they raised a lot of money for him. And it comes down to so many things in this game. The Stephon Diggs touched his fingertips on that big play. Comes down to that.
That's a drop. That's not could he have thrown it better? Could he have thrown it better? Sure.
Yeah.
That was a drop.
But like minusculely better. Yep. Like there is, nobody could have thrown it like that. Like very few quarterbacks could have thrown a ball like that, and it was a drop. It comes down to that drop. It comes down to so many small missed opportunities that seemed not that big in the scheme of things at the beginning of the game and do. It comes down to the Bills only having 6 DBs on the roster going into the game, and two of them getting hurt in the game and like having to play through that.
Isn't it linebacker?
Yeah, it comes down to all of that, and it stinks that it comes down to that, because I know what Bills fans thought, and it was, this is what they look like this season. Like, this is our year.
Well, and the second half of the season, but
that stings. And I am also a fan of the Bills. It's not that I don't like the Bills at all. Like, I am probably not as much as you as a closeted Bills fan, but I root for the Bills. Like, how can you not, is how I feel. So this, I mean, it stings. It stings if you're a Bills fan. It stings if you were rooting for them. But the Chiefs were just out, I mean, they just a tiny bit outperformed the Bills in this one. And that's what it came down to. This is the first, I wanted to point out that this is the first time Snead allowed a touchdown all season, which was pretty crazy. That stat to me was
Snead
crazy.
Being L'Jarius Snead,
yes,
cornerback for the
for the Chiefs. That was crazy. And like the Bills did what they could. The Chiefs came into this game only allowing 7 points in the second half of games and couldn't keep that streak up. The Bills busted that streak open. The Chiefs interior were struggling, and I really loved what the Bills were doing with their offensive line. They were bringing out a 6th offensive lineman, and it really helped with a lot of their blocking. And it threw off the Chiefs. They were doing it all game, and the Chiefs could not adapt to it. Every time up until like literally the final few plays of the game when it started to work, and it led to the field goal attempt instead of being able to pursue going for a touchdown. So, I mean, it comes down to all of that, and the cards didn't fall their way is kind of how this game felt.
Yeah. And before we get to the more fun stuff that had to do with this game, I do just want to say, I just want to know if we're going to be hearing for the next roughly 60 to 70 years about how Bills fans threw snowballs at Patrick Mahomes as he was trying to celebrate with fans after the game. I just want to know. I'm legitimately curious. It seems like that's kind of what we like to do as sports fans. We love to focus in on who did or didn't throw snowballs at one particular time.
Santa Claus.
Yeah, so I'm just curious.
Yeah.
I assume
it seems like you'll be talking about it for the next 6 years.
Look, based on previous experience, it sounds like this is something that we're going to hear about every single time the Bills play a nationally televised game. I'm not saying I think we should or shouldn't. I'm just saying, based on previous experience, from what I've noticed, this seems like something that national reporters will focus on consistently for the next 60 to 70 years.
Oh, absolutely.
No matter how meaningless it is.
No,
but I can only assume that it's something that we will talk about every time they're on a national.
I'm sure you will.
So, no, I don't care. I'm saying I'm assuming based on what I've seen from others that they will do the same thing with the Bills, since that seems to be what we do as a sports community.
Yeah.
I'm really curious, especially because it is the second game in a row and also the second year in a row that they've done that in the playoffs. But again, I'm just assuming people will talk about it as much as we do like other things in a similar way.
Yeah.
But speaking of how Philadelphia is better than everyone else, Jason Kelsey and Taylor Swift and Kylie Kelsey, Philadelphia royalty, all present at the game. This was Jason Kelsey's first time meeting Taylor Swift. And honestly, I don't care if you don't care, because I care much more about the fact that Jason Kelsey was told by his wife to behave. And he said, the first time we went on a date, I got blackout drunk in a bar and fell asleep. That is a true story. Bo Allen had to carry him
Fell
out
asleep
of the bar.
at the bar.
Yep. Bo Allen, former defensive tackle, had to carry Jason Kelsey out of the bar. I don't know how they got married after that. It's a beautiful love story that is worthy of a movie. It's like a Netflix princess, Christmas princess thing, except it's like Philadelphia and Jason Kelsey. But he did not wear a shirt. He was out in the stands yelling with people.
He jumped out of his suite.
He jumped out of
That's
the
how he
suite.
got out in the stands.
Yep.
He jumped out of his suite like the tweets will tell you, like one of the dinosaurs in Jurassic Park. Like he was free. He jumped out and ran out into the stands to celebrate with anyone. Didn't matter if you were a Chiefs fan or a Bills fan. He just wanted to celebrate and party.
Yeah, it was beautiful.
He told Kelsey that Kylie Kelsey that he was going to do that when he got into the suite. He's like, "Oh, just so you know,
yes,
I will be taking my shirt off and jumping out of that window." And Kylie was like, "Don't you dare!
Yeah,
like don't do that. Don't embarrass me."
She knew he would.
And you could see her in the back, like completely unfazed, like right at the beginning of like him taking his shirt off and standing.
No, she wasn't unfazed.
At the window.
That's unfair. She was phased, but she loves him, and it showed.
Yes.
Which was beautiful. Also, Cara Delevingne was there. I don't know why, but that very went under my radar. She's an actress.
Yeah,
I don't know who that
there.
is. Just she was there. Very interesting. But I love Jason Kelsey. He is America's sweetheart. So
it was a really good episode of New Heights this week with even Travis's reaction to the stories.
He loved it.
Oh my god, he loved it. Travis Kelsey threw up the big heart. Chop.
Yeah, is that a Taylor Swift thing? I assumed it was by Twitter's reaction, but I didn't know. So
he seemed pretty back this game.
He's been great in the playoffs so far.
He has. So pretty cool. One final stat: all winning quarterbacks up until this point, so through wild card and divisional round, have not thrown an interception in their respective games. So every team that has won, their quarterback has not thrown an interception.
Interesting.
Yeah.
There you go.
All right, let's talk about our conference championships. The stage is set. We are ready to go. Next week, our first game will be on Sunday at 3. That will be the number 3 seed Chiefs heading to Baltimore to face the number 1 seed Ravens. That's Sunday at 3, and Baltimore opens as 3.5-point favorites.
Yeah. This is Lamar Jackson's first AFC Championship appearance. I think you said earlier this is Baltimore's first time hosting the AFC Championship. We're going to get more Jason Kelsey and Taylor Swift in Baltimore, so not nearly as far of a drive for Jason. I'm sure he's thrilled about that. Maybe the kids will come and meet Taylor. Who knows? But a couple things that I had found before this. And actually, I want to read this out in its mostly in its entirety. This was something I got from John Breach from CBS Sports. This pertains to all of the conference championship. So teams that play on Saturday, which means that they get one extra day of rest, have gone 19-9 in the conference title round over the past 13 years. Both that applies for both the Niners and the Ravens. To add to that, at least one team that played on Saturday in the divisional round has won at least one of the conference title games in 17 of the past 19 years, which means it's highly unlikely that both the Lions and Chiefs win. The one-day advantage doesn't sound like much, but you can think of it like this. While the Chiefs were busy fighting for their lives in a one-score win over the Bills on Sunday night, the Ravens were sitting around tweeting out shirtless locker room pictures. And to add to that, in 8 of the past 10 years, the home team has won the NFC Championship game. And in a perfect coincidence, the home team has also won 8 of the past 10 conference title games in the AFC. So a lot of the numbers point to the Niners and the Ravens having a
Yep.
lot of advantages going into this game.
Yes, it does. Do you want to read? I'll read some of the stats you gave us here.
Yeah.
The Ravens gave up the fewest points this year on defense, which was only 16.5 per game, and led the league in sacks with 60. Chiefs were second in both of those categories, but Mahomes has been sacked 0 times this postseason. He's 1-3 this season when sacked 3 or more times. And since the start of the playoffs, the Chiefs offense has averaged more yards and points than they did during the regular season. So yeah, it's going to be the best defense that Mahomes has. The Ravens defense is going to be the best defense that Mahomes has faced this season. And it seems like genuinely getting pressure on Mahomes seems to have a lot of, will work well for the Ravens if possible. I mean, it worked for the Ravens team against the Texans. It was a really effective way to slow down the Texans offense. And I think it will be very helpful. But you're going to have to, I think you're going to have to do something a little bit more. And you're going to have to try and contain Mahomes because he's been using his legs more in these later weeks. So this Ravens defense is going to have to adapt to containing him. As well.
It's the Chiefs have taken it to a new level in the playoffs so far this postseason. They've just been better on all accounts on offense. They've looked more cohesive. Maybe that is because Kadarius Toney has not been playing. That's very possible. The second half of the year emergence of Rashee Rice is definitely part of that, along with Travis Kelce looking more like his old self on offense. He's averaging over 70 yards per game in the playoffs, and in the last, I think, 3 weeks, he was averaging closer to like 30 or 40, as well as averaging 2 touchdowns per game in the playoffs. He's been awesome, and when he's awesome, that only makes Mahomes' life easier. The offense has been humming, and the defense continued exactly what they were doing in the regular season. And that's going to pair up really well against a Ravens offense that has been operating on all cylinders all season, as we've talked about, and the number 1 defense in the NFL for sure. They're deep on both sides of the ball. And on defense especially, they just have more talent that I could probably care to sit here and name. It's going to be a really, really good game. And truly 2 of the best football teams that exist. It feels like a really dumb and obvious way to say that, but just as a football fan, there's so much talent. There's going to be so many good things happening that you should be excited.
Yeah. And it's just like, while Mahomes and Lamar have been here for some time, it still is that feeling of like a new era, right, of football, and getting to see these 2 duke it out at this level is something to be grateful for. Like, getting it pairs up nicely, and I think this is the way a lot of people, not me, I didn't think this highly of the Ravens early on in the season. I thought highly of them, not this highly, but a lot of people saw it drawn up like this. And I think this emerges 2 of the best teams of the AFC, and I think it's going to be a dogfight out there. I want to know who you're taking.
I'm going to take the Ravens, I think.
I am also taking the Ravens.
Yeah.
I want to know on one side of the ball, like from the Chiefs and from the Ravens, who you think their game changers need to be for each of the teams to win.
On the Chiefs, I'm going to have to say Isaiah Pacheco. I think if they can control the clock and keep the ball out of Lamar Jackson's hand and sustain drives, I think Isaiah Pacheco is an important part of that, especially whether or not he's healthy. They do believe he's going to play, but how effective is he going to be? And I think keeping the ball out of Lamar Jackson's hands is going to be very key. And for the Ravens, I mean, the obvious answer is Lamar. He's the MVP. He's the MVP of the league. If it's not him, I just need one of the pass catchers to step up, like big time. Whether that's Mark Andrews coming back from injury, we don't know if he is yet. Isaiah Likely, who's been on fire recently, or the rookie Zay Flowers, or one of a number of other guys. Is Nelson Aguilar? Yeah, he's still there.
Yeah, he got a touchdown. So
he
was the first touchdown scorer.
Maybe Nelson Aguilar.
Rashad Bateman.
Yeah, Rashad Bateman. They got so many guys. You just need one to step up, I think, and have a big game. So, yeah, that's what I'm going to go with.
Yep, I agree with you on Lamar Jackson. It is my choice, and specifically his legs. For me, for the Chiefs, I actually think it is going to be Rashee Rice for me. I think trying to use him a lot early on is going to open up a lot more for someone like Travis Kelce to help you secure the game later on in the game, because you can see patterns develop with Mahomes, and I think the Ravens are going to try and abuse that if they can see that he's relying on Rashee Rice. I think it's going to open up Travis Kelce more because the same way every team does, I expect the Ravens to come in double teamed on Kelce most of the game. So I think relying on Rice to then later on revert back to your guy is going to be crucial for the Chiefs.
Yeah, agreed.
All right, and we have another 3-1 matchup. The number 3 Detroit Lions will be heading across the country to San Francisco, where they'll be seeing the number 1 seed 49ers. That will happen Sunday at 6:30, and San Francisco opens as 7-point favorites against the Lions.
Yeah. So a couple things here. To start, obviously the Deebo Samuel injury is massive.
Yeah.
The offense did not look the same after he left the game. Kyle Shanahan came out and said that it affected the way that they were looking at things. It affected the way that they were calling plays. It affected the whole offense, and that's not surprising. He's a do-it-all player for them, and he's very good at what he does. It all. So that's huge. That's a massive question mark going into the game. I don't know when we're going to know. It truly feels like a 50-50 chance right now. I lean on the side of him going, but I'm questioning how effective he'll be if he does. An interesting stat, Lions haven't won a road playoff game since 1957, and they have not won in San Francisco since 1975. It's also the first time since 1991 the Lions are in the NFC Championship game.
Mm-hmm. There's really not much to talk about the Moon. I would love to give you some more Moon stats, but the Moon seems to not favor or discourage either of these teams. So it's not up to the Moon this time.
Thank God.
Yeah. Some more interesting
stats. Entertain that. I don't.
The Moon? It's a full moon tonight. Did you know that?
No.
You should know that.
It's foggy here. I can't see my neighbor's
house. You should
house.
know the power of a full moon.
Just shut up and keep reading.
The Lions gave up the 6th most passing yards per game in the regular season with 279. Both Stafford and Baker put up 349 or more, so it obviously went over that. The Niners defense has allowed the 3rd fewest points and the 8th fewest yards this season, which is interesting, noting how well and effective this Lions offense has been, to see how well they pair up with that. They gave up 90 catches for 625 yards to running backs, which ranked in the bottom 8th of the NFL of both categories. For CMC, the Lions gave up the 2nd least rushing yards this season. And when the Lions went 4-4 this season, I love this stat, when Goff threw at least 1 pick, but 10-1 when he didn't. As for the 49ers, they went 2-4 in games where Purdy threw 1 pick, but 11-0 when he didn't throw any interceptions.
Yeah.
So turnovers is the name of the game in this one.
And I think that's really big for the Lions defense because they've been particularly effective this postseason in creating big plays on defense, creating big turnovers. CJ had a big one last week after all the nonsense back and forth between him and Baker Mayfield. It was on a pick drill. CJ is just always in the right place at the right time, but he made the play nonetheless. That's 90% of the battle, it feels like, with defensive backs and interceptions. But yeah, I think that stat and the stat about the Niners defense being susceptible to passing yards to the running back are 2 things that I'm going to be hyper-focused on going into this matchup.
It's for me, the Lions secondary, huge part of it for me is where I'm going to focus a lot of my attention. I think they were really creative with their pressure against the Bucks, and I'm really intrigued to see how that works against the Niners. They even had a couple safety blitzes in there. Brian Branch got a sack, I believe, at one point. It was just so creative, and I think that's going to be really crucial here with trying to throw Brock Purdy off. And I think that has to be your whole game plan because, the numbers show you that when that happens, it favors you so much. So I think that has to be the Lions' game plan here, is just disrupt as much as possible on defense in any facet. And I think pressure is going to be a huge part of that. But their secondary has always been really interesting to me this year. I'm a huge fan of Brian Branch. So I always have the Lions secondary.
What's your pick?
The Lions.
And who are your difference makers? Whatever that question you asked me.
For the Niners, I actually think I'm going to say George Kittle. Just a big guy against this Lions defense. I think that is going to be important. It's all going to come down to Deebo's there because I think that made a huge difference. But I'm still picking George Kittle either way. The Lions for me is probably going to be, for me, it's a tie between like Jahmyr Gibbs and Aiden Hutchinson.
Those were going to be my picks. Yep. Not for the Niners, but for the Lions. Yeah. Yeah. Jahmyr Gibbs, because of exactly what I mentioned. They gave up 90 catches for 625 yards running back, which both were bottom 8 in the NFL this season. Jahmyr Gibbs has been massive for the Lions on this playoff run, both in the postseason and to end the season. He's been on a tear. He's electric, and it's so fun to watch them get the ball into his hands. And not give it to David Montgomery 40 times a game. David Montgomery's been fine, but
how far we've come.
Yep, from week one, when it was extremely clear which one was more talented and whatever. Regardless, Jahmyr Gibbs is a game changer, and Aiden Hutchinson is a great answer because I do think that if they want to win this game, they need to make Brock Purdy. They just need to get to him. They need to make him unsettled. And for the Niners, for me, I think it's probably Nick Bosa in a very similar manner. Nick Bosa and Javon Hargrave. Javon Hargrave has been awesome this season. He was an offseason signing for the Niners. He's just a really good interior pass rusher. And I think between the two of them, they need to get pressure on Goff. They need to get in his face. And this Lions offensive line is so good. They're so good. And that is the matchup. I think that is the matchup for me that is going to decide this game. I changed my mind about everything I just said. It's going to be Niners defensive line, Lions offensive line. If they can protect Goff, they win. If they can get to Goff, the Niners win.
Who is your pick?
I'm going to pick the Lions because I really just don't want to pick the Niners. However, if I was actually making a bet on it, I would just pick the Lions to cover the 7 points because I do think it'll be closer than that, especially if Deebo doesn't play. So.
Yeah.
Also, I trust Dan Campbell to manage a game significantly more than I trust Kyle Shanahan to manage a game, and that is an underrated part of big playoff games. It is extremely underrated, and I don't want to be terrified and scared when we get the ball.
That's the word. You don't want to go into the NFC Championship game scared and playing
if you play
cowardly.
Scared, you blow a 28-3 lead, or you lose all the time. Like he's not a good game manager.
Especially when you're facing a team like the Lions who will take all of the chances you give them. They don't care. Like sometimes it feels like they're playing backyard football. Like, screw it, we'll go for it. Who cares? Like when you're playing a team like that, you're going to have to be aggressive. And I don't know that the Niners are up to that task.
Talent can overcome some of the game management problems, but the talent gap isn't big enough here like it was last week that I can just brush it away. I think it's gonna I think there's going to be, this is my hot take, I think there's going to be at least one moment that we look back as a major turning point, whether it be good or bad, but specifically as a game management factor into this game, whether it's Dan Campbell making a very analytically forward but risky choice to win them the game, or Kyle Shanahan doing something really stupid and it ends up biting him in the ass. I think one of those two things is going to happen. I think that's going to be a storyline leaving the game.
I'm interested to see what it is. Is there any one specific thing you're looking forward to this championship weekend?
Really just seeing Jason Kelce be happy more. It brings me joy, and I haven't had joy surrounding the Philadelphia Eagles in a while. So seeing him be happy makes me happy. That's truly the thing I'm looking forward to.
I'm happy for you.
Thanks.
Well, where can we find you, Duncan, before I close this out here?
You can find me cheering for new head coach of the Milwaukee Bucks, Doc Rivers. I've never seen someone fail upward quite like that man. He is impeccable. He's incredible at his job. And I truly cannot wait for the Sixers to lose to him in the second round, which is probably what's going to happen because depression is real, folks, and the Philadelphia sports teams are cursed. But in the meantime, I will enjoy his demise, and I will laugh at all of the people that have to root for Doc Rivers coaching the Milwaukee Bucks. Other than that, you can find me on Twitter at mpduncan75.
You could find me on Twitter at Ashley_Marie with 2 A's and Ashley. Me, Duncan, the entire Undroppables crew with a lot of amazing new faces on our Patreon, on our Discords. You can get to our Discords by becoming a patron at patreon.com/theundroppables. All of our content here live, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Wednesdays, and on the Undroppables website. There's a lot of great things going on there, so we recommend you stick around. We have a lot of fun things coming up, and my favorite episode of the season is fastly approaching, and it's the Super Bowl episode. So we hope to see you next week. We hope to see you that week, and we hope you have a fantastic championship weekend. Thank you for joining us, and have a great night.
Go Birds.
Bye.